because next up, joining me live in the studio is our next guest. So please give a very warm welcome now to Mike Ferguson, who is the CEO of Intelligent Business Strategies. And Mike, just making your way here into the studio. It's a bit of a one in, one out policy, but Mike, thank you for giving us your time and joining us here in the studio today. Did you manage to catch some of the opening keynote there from Sender?
I certainly did, yeah. It was very good.
Yeah,
very
fantastic. Good. And obviously you're going to be taking more of a look at some of the best practice tips and advice for
I'll be
our
looking
audience.
at the top data trends, I think, that are going forward into 2024.
And before perhaps we get straight into presentation, maybe a quick word about yourself and all of your experience, obviously in intelligence business strategies. Tell us a bit about what you guys do.
Well, I'm an independent industry analyst specializing in data and analytics. I spent a whole career in data management and analytics over 40 years now. Started out just as a regular database administrator, then co-founded a company right at the beginning of the relational database era with a Turing Award winner called Dr. Edgar F. Codd and another guy called Chris Date. Then I went on to become a chief architect of a database vendor myself way back in the late 80s, early 90s at Teradata in Los Angeles. And then came back here in Europe and been working in data and analytics ever since.
Fantastic. So fair to say, live and breathe data.
Yeah,
analytics,
I guess
really.
I do. Yeah.
And it's been a fascinating year, hasn't it? In many ways, certainly even the past couple of years. Some of the trends we've seen. I know you're going to be touching on some of that as part of your presentation and sort of looking ahead to 2024. So I don't want to encroach on any subject material. So we'll get your slide ready. And again, a message to audience watching along. We do encourage thoughts and ideas, comments in the chat section. Carl is watching, our producer, and of course we can involve you, particularly during our panel sessions. So all being well, Mike, we'll have your slide deck ready here in the studio. I can see it there, which we do. Somewhere over our shoulder. Okay. So I'm going to hand things over to you. Cheers, Mike.
Thanks very much, Alex. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you may be. Many thanks for taking time out of your schedule to come to this session today. I want to talk about top data trends, and in order to be able to help you understand those, why they may have come about, I'll just give you a little bit of background quickly on why that might be, then talk about the top data trends, and then perhaps say, well, based upon those trends, what might your investment priorities be going forward when it comes to becoming more data-driven. So I think if you look at most executives today, they are pretty bullish around data and AI right now. Huge expectations coming from it, expecting this to be able to transform their business, lower the costs, give them greater efficiency, therefore improve the overall speed of their business and agility within it, so that they can potentially disrupt the markets that they compete in and gain competitive advantage. And I think that's reflected in this survey here, where you can see that despite the tough economy at the moment, we're seeing organizations increasing their investment in data and AI. And because they're getting measurable results, and you can see almost 92% of companies on this survey showing that they're getting measurable results from that and more projected next year. But whilst that's great news, I think you're not really going to get maximum ROI, if you like, out of data and AI unless you really create a high quality and governed data foundation. And I think for most organizations today, they don't have that. What they've actually got is siloed analytical systems, which are aimed at different kinds of analytical workloads. Traditional data warehousing, sort of for business analysts and BI. We may have something like cloud storage and Spark being used for data science. We've got graph analytics going on often in graph databases, and streaming analytics going on somewhere else. And so all of these silos, if you like, have often got different data integration tools. And so people working in each of those silos often using different tools to integrate data to provide data for those environments, whether that happens to be an individual machine learning model in data science, whether it happens to be classic ETL pipelines going into a data warehouse. But the problem here is there's no standard to share metadata between tools, and therefore people working in silos don't often know what's going on in other silos with respect to integrating data. And if that the data that they want has already been integrated somewhere else, they're often unaware of it, and therefore will reinvent and potentially run the risk of inconsistency by integrating it or transforming it differently from in other silos. At the same time, the output, if you like, of these silos is often not deeply integrated. We don't get to see machine learning integrated with graph, or graph integrated with BI, or machine learning with BI. Well, we do see some machine learning in BI, but certainly not enough, for my opinion. Or streaming integrated with BI. And so for me, there's plenty of opportunity to get far more richer insights by combining these kind of workloads if you could share data on it. Because at the moment, if a user wants to get insights out of these individual silos, we push complexity onto them. We say, well, you've got to deal with the different query languages of a graph database versus a data warehouse. You've got to be able to connect to these. You've got to figure out how to integrate the data coming out of it, making it hard for them. In addition, I think the number of data sources is increasing rapidly, and as it does so, the number of users wanting to integrate additional new data sources with what they may already have also climbs. And as a result of that, what we're seeing is more pressure to integrate data more rapidly, and if a centralized finite resource of data engineers just often becomes a bottleneck and gets outstripped by the pace of business around them. And that demand just unable to keep pace with it. In addition to that, over the last decade or more, we've had a number of different sort of siloed analytical systems. It's quite commonplace to see multiple BI tools around the enterprise, but often also able to see multiple data warehouses in many cases. And of course, each of those tools has got self-service data preparation built into it. At the same time, on the data science side, in the last decade, we've just seen a frenzy of technology come and go, leapfrog each other, and people are using everything from RStudio to Jupyter Notebooks with Python to much more sophisticated data science workbenches, things like Google Vertex AI or AWS SageMaker or Data Robot or Data IQ, for example, and all of them are doing self-service data preparation as well. But it all seems to be for individual need, and so what we've ended up with, if this goes ungoverned, you end up with a kind of Wild West environment, pretty chaotic, people getting data from the sources that they think are the right ones for their own individual use case. And so there's a lot of data integration going on, but not much sharing of what's created. And often you run the risk of personal silos and potentially inconsistent data as people integrate the same data, perhaps for multiple individual needs. And so I guess the approach to building data or producing data for analytics over the last decade has been more like the picture on the left. And so if people can't find stuff, then they just go and reinvent it again. Whereas what people really would like is the picture on the right, which is organized, ready-made, easy-to-find data that they can just go in, pick up and use and start delivering value from. There are other challenges out there as well, more and more data coming into the enterprise from more and more sources, and what we see is data has been progressively spreading out across a distributed data estate. We now have data in multiple software as a service applications outside the enterprise. We've got data in different types of data store in multiple clouds. We've got data in different types of data store on premises, and we've got data streaming in from the edge from a variety of IoT devices, whether that's industrial IoT or consumer IoT, or even streaming in from external sources like financial markets data and whatnot. So that makes it much harder to manage, much harder to find and integrate data as the number of data sources grow. And not only that, but governing this is still fractured. We're still reliant on a number of different administrators around the enterprise, hopefully implementing policies consistently across a range of disparate data stores in order to be able to consistently govern the same data if it appears in multiple places. And so it's hard to be able to govern data, given that governance has now expanded into data access security, privacy, retention, data sharing, data quality, loss prevention, etc. So given that backdrop, even though we are seeing people getting measurable results, I think what we're now seeing is, well, what are the top trends? Well, these are what I see, and without a doubt, in 2023, generative AI has dominated the scene. You know, it's everywhere. People looking at it as generative AI applications in different parts of the business. We're also seeing generative AI arriving in the tools that we're using to produce data and analyze data. Hybrid multi-cloud computing is now normal, but real desire now to modernize data architecture and tear down those silos that we saw earlier and bring together, you know, data warehouses, lake houses, data lakes, and streaming. Also to get away from disparate tools that don't work together, which are damaging our productivity, if you like, or inhibiting us, is probably a better word, to rationalizing that onto a common data and analytics technology stack, so that we can get collaborative development, we can get metadata sharing, bearing in mind if you use best of breed tools, there is no standard to share metadata. In addition, we're seeing democratization to try and get past that bottleneck we saw earlier, democratization not just of BI and data science, which we've already seen, but now data engineering, fueled by things like, or popularized by things like data mesh. But now that we have generative AI simplifying tooling, we can get citizen data engineers with a lesser skill base able to participate and, of course, manage that in a non-disruptive way using the likes of data ops that Sender was talking about. In addition to that, we've got an increased desire to share data, and so seeing the growth of data marketplaces, not only just a shop window to look for data, but also to govern it, govern the sharing of it. We're seeing lower latency data, of course, in demand, but also the desire to take the output of all of these analytical initiatives, like BI, like machine learning models and AI bots, and integrate those into our applications and processes to really become data-driven in every part of our business. And on top of that, we're also looking at trying to do a better job of data governance in terms of getting more integrated in that area, more automation in that area, in order to be able to manage that more complex distributed data landscape. And last but not least, trying to manage cost of all of this as CFOs in a tough economy want a completely holistic FinOps view of the data and analytics ecosystem. So if I zoom in on some of those, you know, things like generative AI, as I said, really probably the number one trend this year since ChatGPT emerged back in about February timeframe. And we're seeing, you know, the real productivity gains that natural language prompts could produce within the context of certain business functions. Here you can see examples in marketing, sales, and service that would really make people far more productive. And you can see this visualization from a survey done in Fortune magazine of CEOs earlier this year, that you can see they clearly indicate that they want to increase efficiencies, that they want to automate manual mundane tasks, that they're looking to reduce costs and to automate the capture of new data using the likes of generative AI. And hopefully that changes the experience of both employees and customers and helps people get the job done quicker. We're also seeing this moving into tooling, and as a result of that, what we're seeing is generative AI being used in business glossaries to speed up our ability to produce those, to enhance and enrich metadata in data catalogs, to help us with building data models, prompt-based data engineering, natural language queries in data virtualization and databases, conversion of one SQL to another SQL to help migration of databases, natural language rules and policies that can be converted into code for governance, to do matching rules to match data in master data, and even generate content off of master data, for example, product information and product marketing, and also conversational data search. And all of this comes down to what I think is one major trend with all of this, which is companies trying to industrialize this, turn this into a much more slick, easy way of being able to produce data and AI, and sort of take a if we could move to the next slide, please. If we could take a Henry Ford production line approach to be able to doing this, to get multiple teams onto a common production line, to be able to produce data products and analytical products on the back of that, things like machine learning and BI reports. And I think for that reason, we're seeing a move away from standalone projects up the maturity curve towards data and analytics communities where we can get collaborative development and start sharing things, and bearing in mind that there's no standard to share metadata between tools. That's having an influence on one of the other trends, which is, well, how do we do all of this on top of a distributed data estate and build that data foundation? And the answer is that I got a common integrated data and analytics technology stack that connects to all these sources and allows me to go ahead and build data products. And then in addition, to get a more modern data architecture and tear down those silos. So if I zoom in on those, then certainly getting a common platform with a data catalog to understand what data is available to people, multiple teams in a federated organizational model, being able to produce data products on top of that platform and share metadata and get the job done quicker through collaborative development. In addition, as you can see, the big difference now between this approach and a sort of silos we saw earlier, building data products. Now what we're doing is building pipelines to produce reusable data products, which can then be combinations of those used for different analytical use cases. And as we modernize our architecture and start to pull down those silos and bring them together on shared data, then we get to use those reusable data products to support multiple analytical workloads without copying. And I think the idea of data catalogs along with generative AI is really going to make a difference to productivity in building those pipelines. Also allow citizen data engineers to be able to do that. So they can generate those pipelines and produce those data products and publish them in a data marketplace, which is not just a shop window for consumers to find ready-made data, which is good enough, but we're seeing that as a governance mechanism to share data, where consumers have to accept a sharing agreement before they can gain access to the data, and we don't have to copy it. And not only that, but we're now seeing machine learning models and AI bots and whatnot being added into these marketplaces, which to me is turning them into data and analytics marketplaces. And I think next year we're going to see BI reports added into there as well. So here you see the benefit of data products in a marketplace on the lower part of the diagram, where people can come along and pick whatever combination of data products they need, as you can see, to put together a data mart and immediately start going and analyzing the data within it. And so it becomes an assembly of those components rather than asking people to go all the way back to raw data every time. Whilst at the same time, the data scientist is able to use exact same data products to be able to pull the features that they need for their machine learning models when they're training it. Now, if we build on what Sender spoke about, which is the idea of saying, well, what happens if these data products were on open table formats like Iceberg or the others? That's a bit of a game changer in the sense that now we've got table formats that are open to multiple query engines as opposed to proprietary table formats that were locked into a specific database. And because of that, we can therefore support multiple analytical workloads running on different engines, whilst at the same time guaranteeing integrity of the data, because open table formats support ACID properties, transaction integrity, and at the same time do schema governance and schema enforcement, and also provide hidden partitioning and compression, which allows us to do parallel query, which is much better performance than just accessing files in cloud storage. So therefore, the architecture changes where we can put data in open tables and open it up to multiple engines to support multiple analytical workloads. And if we can support federated query, we could potentially create those multiple table formats on multiple clouds and still be able to access them, and therefore provide a shared environment to create data products that can then be used for multiple analytical use cases. In addition, as you can see in a Dremio environment, therefore we could connect to these open table formats through the Dremio catalog and then Dremio Sonar on top, building those data products and being able to support both business intelligence and data science workloads, for example. And then finally, we pull out those data products. Consumers can select what they need, produce the analytical products, the machine learning models, the BI reports and whatnot that you see and then publish those back in so that people coming after them find 60%, maybe 70%, maybe 80% or more of what they need already made, and so they get progressively faster. So this approach is accelerating everything over time in a progressive manner. And at the same time, the marketplace starts to move to the center of the enterprise where people can find ready-made and start wiring those into the applications and processes to really become a data-driven enterprise. On the governance front then, just to sort of wrap up, I mean, we see trying to do a better job over there, data catalogs, understanding the distributed data estate, and allowing both central functions like legal on data privacy and data owners around the enterprise to define the policies to govern this data, within the catalog, but without a metadata standard to push those policies to multiple underlying systems. We will see, software agents and workflows to try and govern those policies and enforce them out across the distributed data estates. So given that those are the major trends that I see, then where should your investment priorities be? And I sort of see 5 broad categories here. A data and analytics foundation. I think that means getting a data and analytics program office in place, get a full-blown integrated data governance program in place, and a common data and analytics stack. Data literacy, upskilling the people across the business by creating a data and analytics community, creating a data and analytics academy, using generative AI to be able to make tools available to people with lower skills base and sharing everything across teams. Modernizing the architecture using open table formats to tear down those silos and get to a shared data environment so that we can support multiple analytical workloads in different compute clusters, even on the cloud. And then build data products to get this reusable approach going and to accelerate consumers so they get faster and faster and faster at delivering value and making sure that the projects that they're working on are aligned with your business strategy. And again, using generative AI to help them become more productive and to be able to share what they create across the enterprise. And then, of course, integrate what they create into our processes and applications. So I hope that's given you an idea of what I think the data trends are. And with that, I'll hand it back to Alex.
Fantastic stuff. Mike, thank you very much indeed for delivering our second presentation as part of this Dremio Showcase. A lot of ground covered, so a lot to digest, no doubt, for folks watching along. But a couple of questions from me, if that's all right. I think we've got a couple of minutes before our panel. But the first one, and just sort of reflecting on some of your themes as you set out. Of course, generative AI is very much talk of the town these days for a lot of organizations. But as we look ahead to the future and as AI adoption matures, as it no doubt will, do you think fundamentally there will be a greater appreciation for data quality? We've always heard the adage garbage in, garbage out, but quite frankly, these models can only produce outcomes as good as the data we're putting in. Is that going to improve an awareness and appreciation for data quality, do you think?
100%. I think the realization that AI is now strategically important is already in the boardroom in most of my clients, at least. But I think, you can't get accurate predictions, you can't get, accurate AI, accurate business intelligence even with inconsistent, poor quality data. And so I think this really puts a responsibility on the business to make as much effort as possible to try and get the quality of data as high as possible to guarantee really rock solid predictions and recommendations and content that they generate through generative AI. Absolutely.
And you mentioned data management as well, I think somewhere in your piece, and we know that's something that organizations, some have struggled with to get a handle on. And I'm just curious, in this AI era that we've entered, we see a lot of talk about using data to drive AI, but can you actually see the other way around where we can use AI to enhance data management? Is that a trend?
100%. It's already happening. It's going into tools. I actually think AI will also make recommendations to people in order to help improve the quality of data and therefore speed up their ability to engineer it. And so with generative AI as well, able to generate code, accelerate that even more. And so we're using recommendations where it makes sense. And so AI being baked into the tools, if you like, in order to be able to help people be more productive and do a much better job of improving quality.
And One other quick question for you, because I think panelists are waiting in the wings patiently, but a lot of organizations have almost too much data. We hear it time and time again, almost drowning in too much data. Are we going to need to save as much data in this future that we're heading towards, do you think, fundamentally?
Are we going to what, sorry?
Have to save as much data?
I think there'll always be a thirst for data, without a shadow of a doubt. I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon. But I do think what people want is the ability to get away from 80% of your time spent processing and transforming and integrating data. That number has to get shortened dramatically. And I think that's where the focus, if companies double down on this, whilst also improving data quality, then we're going to see really measurable results at the other end of this. I think that's, so I don't think it's a case of too much data. I think we really need to understand it more rapidly and be able to figure out how to use it to drive business value.
And that's where, of course, as you say, the value lies, no doubt.
Absolutely.
But we're going to get into that hopefully a little bit more in this next session. But Mike, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us as part of your presentation. If you stay put for just a moment, as I say, that is our second session as part of our Dremio showcase here today. Thank you very much for watching along so far. We've got plenty more on the way. Up next, it is our panel. We'll be back very shortly.